Good morning, economics students. Today, we're going to learn about gross domestic product. Let's go. Gross domestic product, I'm going to backtrack here. Gross domestic product is one of the three main economic determinants. So if you did the work yesterday, you should have learned about business cycles, recessions and expansions, and what causes recessions and expansions. And the three main determinants that can cause the economy to either grow or shrink are these three things: inflation, unemployment, and gross domestic product. So, for example, when you have rampant unemployment, you're going to get into a recession. When you have growing GDP, you're going to be in an expansion. When you have rising inflation coupled with rising unemployment, you're going to be in a recession. Those three things make or break an economy. Very interesting. Let's get into GDP. GDP stands for gross domestic product. You have to know what those three words mean. Gross, meaning total. Domestic, no. Domestic, meaning in-house. Production, or meaning the things you make and produce here. Domestic, meaning it has to be made here in the United States. In order for something to be counted towards gross domestic product, there's three ways of counting it. What we're going to look at right now is one of the ways in which they measure all final goods and services. So if you look at the bottom here, if you're comparing two countries, country A makes only two things. They make only t-shirts and shoes. Country B makes computers and web services. Which country would have a higher GDP? The answer is country B, because it takes more skills and talents to provide web services and to produce computers. Because those cost more to make, they're going to sell for a higher price. So therefore, when GDP is determined between these two countries, because computers and web services are selling at a higher price, GDP is going to be higher for country B. That is one reason why the United States has for a while been on top of the world GDP rankings. We make a lot of expensive and productive goods and services. So everything from the value meal that you buy at McDonald's, to the shoes that you buy, provided they were made here, to the cars that you buy and the phones that you buy, provided they were made here, those all count towards US GDP. You might be wondering, all right, well, what if we buy a video game made in Japan or a t-shirt made in China? That would count towards Japanese GDP and Chinese GDP. My kids are looking at me right now like I'm insane. I'm not insane. I'm just an economics teacher. So again, if you have a country that makes things, you count, is it made here? Is it made during this year? And how much does it sell at? That would count towards GDP. Here are some other things to keep in mind. If you're using this final good method of counting GDP, it has to be a finished good. So for example, the Chromebook that you're using, the plastics, metals, wires that go into making a Chromebook, those would not be counted. Only the final selling price of the Chromebook would be counted towards GDP. And you might be wondering, all right, well, what if I'm a company that just makes the wires and plastics and metals to make a Chromebook? How come that's not counted? That's my finished good. Yes, there's another way of counting GDP. There's three different ways. To keep things simple here, we're just going to use the final method. So that is counted in another method. Another way you could count GDP is by adding up everybody's wages within a country. So that's known as the income method. Like, so if you wanted to count the salary you made at your part-time job, my salary as a teacher, my wife's salary as a hairstylist, that's another way of determining gross domestic product. So again, there's three different ways to keep it simple. I'm just using the final method, which only counts final goods and services made in a country. Here's some main components of gross domestic product. So when the government spends money on roads, bridges, and highways, That's spending money on a finished good or service. When they're spending money on the military salaries count as income. So government spending is a main component of GDP. When you guys spend money on TVs and food and phones, batteries, things like that, consumer spending. If you're a business and you decide to put a new roof on one of your factories, you decide to bring in new computers to train your workers, you're investing in your business. That's business investment. And if you make something here and it's bought by foreigners, say you're making different pens and pencils, those pens and pencils are bought by someone in Germany, that counts as well because it's made here and it's sold to somebody else. If it's not listed, if it doesn't count one of those four criteria, it's not counted towards US GDP. So these are the four main components: G plus C plus I, investment, plus E. Here's how GDP is determined. I give you an example there. If your country only makes one thing, they make air conditioners, they make 50 of them, and during a given year, they make 50 air conditioners and sell all 50 at $25. 50 air conditioners times $25 would be 1,250, and that would be your GDP for that year, the 1,250. Here's the world GDP rankings, if you're wondering. You might be thinking, who's in the top five? Well, here you go. In the top five, you have the United States. This is in US dollars. The United States in 2019 made $21 billion worth of goods and services. China is the runner up at $14 billion, followed by Japan, Germany, and India. If you're trying to predict who's going to be in the top five by 2050, a lot of economists believe that these countries will move into the top five: Brazil, India, and Nigeria, which I don't even see in like the top 12. Nigeria, for some reason I can't scroll. There we go. Nigeria is still down here, way down here, but because of Nigeria's growing population, oil production, and chemical and other textile productions, a lot of people believe Nigeria will move into the top 10 to 5 rankings by 2050. Let's go back. Here's some is it counted practice. If you click on these slides, I'm watching Game 1 of the 2005 World Series with the White Sox right now, so I'm a little preoccupied here. The White Sox are up 4-3. If you want to count, if you want to do some practice here, you can go through these. I actually do need to update this because now it's 2020. I'll probably go through these tomorrow too, some Friday review. If you're comparing two countries, the country of Northland for 2 different years, what I want you to do in 2016, if they made 100 pens that sell at $2 each, 200 light bulbs that sell at $3 each, and 50 pencils that sell at $1 each, and then the prices change for 2017, pause the video and see if you could determine GDP for those 2 years. For 2016 at those prices and for 2017 at those prices. Notice that the quantity doesn't change for each year, just the price. And you should notice that if I were to do the math right now,
Mom, look up Luigi Mansion.
the GDP for 2016 should be $850. 2 times 100 is 200. 3 times 200 is 600. So that would put you at 800. $1 times 50 would be $50. So it should be $850 for GDP for 2016. In 2017, if you did 3 times 100, it would be 300. 4 times 200 would be 800. And 150 times 50 would be 75. So you should get a GDP of 1,175 for 2017. So what changed? And did this resemble production?
Yep.
Well, if you look at 2016 to 2017, Northland didn't produce any more pens, light bulbs, and pencils. The only thing that changed was the price. So were your employees really that more productive? No. What really happened was just inflation, price increases. So you might be wondering, all right, well, is GDP really the best indicator of how productive an economy is if, in this case, Northland's GDP increased, but they really weren't any more productive? So there's a way of determining or differentiating between true production and just inflation. And that measure that we use is something known as real GDP. So real GDP removes price increases, and it's based on a current year price. And it uses what's known as a base year in order to take out inflation and to find how truly productive an economy is. You take the nominal GDP. So the nominal GDP, if you go back here for 2017, was 1,175. And what you would do is you would divide the nominal GDP of 1,175 by the price index, taking out inflation, multiplying by 100, and that would give you the real GDP to show you how truly productive an economy is. Tomorrow, we'll stop here. What I want you guys to do is to try out these 6 problems. And when we come back tomorrow, I'll have a video which talks you through how to answer these 6 problems. So for number 1 and 2, to find real GDP for year 3 and 4, remember it's nominal divided by the price index times 100. For 3 and 4, numbers 3 and 4, you would take your real GDP, your answers for 1 and 2, and divide it by the population. And then for 5 and 6, it's looking for a percentage change. Anytime it's looking for rate, it's looking for a percentage change. So see if you can answer these questions. Well, I'll come back tomorrow with an answer key in a video. And in conclusion, make sure you know how GDP is counted. You know what GDP is. You know the main components of GDP. And you can tell me the difference between nominal GDP, current year prices, and real GDP, showing how truly productive an economy is because it takes out inflation. Try those 6 problems out. Feel free to contribute to that discussion board. Have a good day, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.